Excited to have Julien Paquin on the podcast today. Julien, how are you?
I'm good, Jim. How are you?
Good, good. Things going well for you in Toronto?
Yeah, it's starting to feel like Christmas now. The snow should hit today. Wind chill's cold, so finally feeling like Christmas is upon us. So happy to see that.
Yeah, yeah, it gets you in the mood for the season for sure. So tell me a little bit about what you and the rest of your team have been up to during the pandemic, how you guys have been able to continue to tread water and evolve, and in some cases even expand. Tell us a little bit about your vision during the pandemic, and then we'll get into your vision following the pandemic.
Sounds good. It's like everyone. I mean, it feels like it did start on that date, that March 15 or 16, whenever the NBA, shut it down, and then it was anyone in the entertainment business knew that the next day was over, and the tap stopped. It was interesting though because leading into that, my father, who's my partner, Gilles Paquin, a couple months into it, as it was starting, the coronavirus was word was coming down of what was happening, and a lot of people took it more seriously than others. Gilles was quite uh, dialed into the possibilities that this could really shut us down, and I remember saying to him, like, Gilles, you're crazy. This will never happen, and so of course it did. So we
That's because he was old enough to live through the Spanish flu. So just taking a little jab at Gilles there. I love you, buddy, but no, he probably just had some sense of awareness of how these things can go based on just being around and seeing a few of them come and go over the years.
Yeah, and that was it. And so as a as we're a small company, although we have multiple office and 30 plus employees, it's still a very relatively a small operation. So he knew what this could mean to us, and so I don't want to say that we didn't. I don't think we prepped really, other than mentally. That he was like mentally prepped for the day it happened. More than maybe some of us were. But it was, it was that moment where, because really you're thinking about uh, the people that work with you, and the staff that we have, and these people that are, you know, that think, they're like, oh my God, how are the doors going to stay open? It's that knowledge when you don't have that knowledge, and so you're waiting, on myself or Gilles or Todd or whoever to sort of go, okay, guys, that we're going to be good, but we didn't know anything. So it's like it was that communication, and it was about, and I think that's the first thing we did is we tried to communicate, um, which was that we have no clue. And I think that really helped everyone, is that we were truly in it together as a team with the staff that we had, and it was the artists that way too. Just we have no clue. We're happy to go back and forth and have these discussions, but at the end of the day, we have no clue. And here's what we see, and everybody, you're going to be safe for 3 months, or you're going to be safe for 6 months, and we're going to be able to do this. And so I think that was at the beginning, is just try to settle everybody down, including ourselves, because it was, got to talk to the bank, and you got to talk to the landlords, and the mortgages and all that kind of thing. So I think that was very important, and I felt like we handled that pretty well.
Right, and you've got the added factor of being concerned for people's health, trying to come up with new operational protocols for your offices. So I would assume you guys had everyone just full stop for the most part work from home.
Exactly. So everybody worked from home, and that was no problem because we just sort of opened up our Nashville office, and Michelle Zito down there. So we had a space, but she had been working from home anyways. It was, and in Vancouver we have two people out there that were working from home, so that was no problem. In Toronto, it was getting used to that. In Winnipeg, it was getting used to that. Um, and that took a minute, but then once we got it together, and again, constant sort of the communication and the Zoom meetings, and I feel like all of a sudden the time you had with people, the interactions were far more meaningful. as opposed to at the office where you're pretty insular anyways. And even though it's a social business we're in, people were really stuck in their own ways.
Yeah.
I almost feel like there was when we talk about this reset, the value of being in a common space like an office, it was starting to lose whatever it once had, which was that interactivity because of you're on your emails or you're on your phone calls and your world is right here anyways. And so I think that's going to be the most important thing coming out of it. And we found those ways to sort of communicate more meaningfully, and that every conversation meant something.
Yeah, you sort of start to take it for granted, right?
Yeah,
And then you're working in your siloed world, even though you've got somebody in the office right next to you that you should be communicating with on a more regular basis. And this sort of forced the awareness of that. Another thing it really forced, I think, for most of us in the industry is the awareness of the hamster wheel.
yeah,
A lot of us were on a hamster wheel, whether it was the consistency and routine of travel, show, office, and we weren't even aware we were on a hamster wheel.
yeah,
And now we've been forced to get off it and
yeah,
recalibrate our time
yeah,
and our ability to plan and our ability to really take a deep breath and look forward to what we want in terms of vision and where we want our companies and our individual lives to go. And it's so easy to lose track of that. And a year turns into 5 years and 10 years in no time. And you haven't had a minute to sort of sit back and plan or consider what kind of a life you've built out for yourself.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that was the even when early on as we were mapping out, projecting what the losses were going to be and what the company was going to look like coming out of it, or in at the beginning of it, middle or an end, whatever that is. There was a certain point of it where it was like, okay, we sort of have some clarity. And this is, again, let's not forget, this is when we're in April, and some of the tours we were rerouting for June and May and June, like it was,
Yeah.
of that year. It's like, we look back on it and go, you can go, well, yeah, no, I knew this thing was going to go into 2021. But part of you is like, well, I don't know, it might only be a month and everybody's locking down. So you're making these decisions. And, but all that to say, that aside, um, I really, at a certain point, was looking at the organization myself, and I think everybody was doing the same. Going, okay, is an opportunity for us? Um, can we, and forget about financially because that's a big loser, but can we come out of this better than when we came in?
Right.
And I think that was immediately something that we just started, figuring out, okay, what are all these things that it's like, oh, if only you had time to do all these things, you'd always say to yourself, then you do them. Well, now we've got time. We got plenty of time, and we've got plenty of our minds are still the same. We knew it would, knock on wood, it's going to come back. This is not like the record business in the 90s and the
Late
top.
90s, early 2000s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not like that, because that was just, live music will come back. And it'll look much the way it does now, with some tweaks and things like that. So we didn't have to, yeah, we had to pivot and try and find some, and we were lucky enough to, and we can talk about that later, to start getting in some businesses that are allowed now. We're, the exhibition business, which we only just had to shut down a couple of the properties we had there. So that was the chance for us to, how does this look, and what are the opportunities out there, and we were able to see some opportunities. Were larger organizations or smaller, whatever it was, that situations became available, that we were able to cut some deals that we couldn't have cut in a normal time.
How did you handle the conversations with managers and artists and try to communicate as much certainty as you could about the state of where things were?
Yeah. Um, at first you're just, it's almost like you're towing a company line. We're gonna
Right.
get through this. This is good, okay. And just sort of you're talking about things in chunks, and I think that was, you really what I was trying to do. It's like we can't look at this as one big thing. It's like, okay, so where are we today? What do we have to cancel, postpone, move today? What does that look like? On that, if it can't happen. This was a lot of it too. It's like, let's do this. I have no idea if this is going to happen. Let's postpone this tour until this date. I have no idea if it's going to happen, but I'm not doing anything now, anyways. So
Yeah.
well, if I got to postpone it a second time, it's a big deal. And so a lot of those discussions were happening, but really the biggest one that early on we were having was about the virtual shows, and what what's the value in that? Should I even, a lot of the artists and managers, why would I bother? Who wants to see my kitchen? How am I connecting really? And so we really got into that, and the challenge was, you still are, um, there is that wall there where the audience does want to connect with you, but you're also you want to stay slightly out of reach. You want to still be a star. And it's hard to have that if, I can see, your dirty laundry in the background and the dirty dishes here. And so if you're going to do the virtual shows, let's come up with something. I have no idea what that is, but and I would challenge back to them, come up with something amazing. Use
Something
whatever.
unique.
Yeah, and so I think that, lots of that came out, and all the people were able to, create some home studios and stuff like that. So it was a lot about the virtual shows, and I still feel the same way. As long as you're going to spend time and think about it, I think everybody needed to try it. Yeah.
As it pertains to the virtual shows, were you doing predominantly public shows with a paywall on a platform, or were you doing more private corporate events for your artists where they would just beam into company XYZ and play a few songs and do a Q&A? Where were you seeing the most business and the most booking?
It was right away there were some companies that were doing that, whether it was Air Miles or IBM and some of those. So those were coming pretty quickly. But also, some of these platforms were pretty um, aggressive, I would say, or just providing that platform, the paywall. So they were happening all sort of in tandem,
Right.
and and so I think that was, we were finding that, and just sort of figuring out what that was going to look like. And a paywall was, so is it $5? Is it $10? Is it, what's that? What's that?
Yeah. How do we determine that price
Like,
point?
and then there was a lot of artists who are just like, what, let's do a pay what you can. And as those are sometimes extremely successful, because there are those that have the ability, fans that have the ability that want to help, and so they'll pay
Right.
a lot more than that, $10 or $15. So I think we were just, it was that mix, and then the technology, what was the most user friendly, and for the most part, I think, as I say, it was I've had no issue with the live streams, other than the fact that it's like, don't just mail it in. Make sure you spent your life on this craft. You don't want the next year of material that people are seeing of you, again, singing in your kitchen without a proper sound check.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult to make those situations compelling enough for the viewer. So you're right. You almost have to have this massive fan base in order for people to actually uh, patronize it enough, or participate in it enough that it works for most artists. Other than that, the private stuff seems to be hopping. So that's been good. And you guys also made some really bold moves as a company during the pandemic. You opened a Nashville office. You brought on a couple of big agents, Vesna, Jason Furman. Tell us a little bit about why you made those moves when you did, and whether or not you're feeling good about them still.
Yeah, good question. Um, 100% feel good about them still, and I think, again, starting sort of peeling it back and starting from, it's about opportunities, and it was about a time, you know as we're looking and seeing the landscape, I mean, the good news for us, I mean, as a company, as a small company, and successful and not successful, and ups and downs, like we've learned to live on air. Money. So it's like we know how to figure out how to maximize every dollar. So it was, although terrifying, it's like, oh, we've been here before. Like we know that muscle memory was there. So when
So what's an
as a
example of that, Julian? What's an example of how you guys have been able to sort of keep things together when finances were tight before?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, and all the credits really starts and ends with my father, Gilles, because he started out as a concert promoter, and so he was a concert promoter, and so just those you touch in concert promotion quite a bit. You face down the barrel of some pretty dark times as a concert promoter, and you've got to figure out where to maximize the dollars there. And so in the early days for us, when Gilles went from a concert promoter to being an artist manager, his first client was Fred Penner, and Fred Penner was a huge star of concert halls across North America. His first move was like, and this is in the late 80s, it's like, well, we're giving all the money away to a promoter, and there's no better promoter than me. And so Gilles was the promoter for Fred Penner as well as the manager, and they had this partnership that was amazing. And so, as you're starting that business, and then, when we started the agency, it was small steps, but there was always a time where one of those areas wasn't that successful, and then you sort of had to double down in another area, and that's why our portfolio as a company has always been pretty diverse. So even in the pandemic, we had, the management division, Randy Bachman, Buffy St. Marie, Donovan Woods, Wild Rivers, Barney Bentel. There was, especially with Donovan Woods and Wild Rivers, real movement, new publishing deal, new record deals and stuff like that. So there was actually, Michelle, was busy, and that was great. And Gilles was busy, and the exhibit. So, anyways, it was Gilles is an entrepreneur. He is the ultimate entrepreneur. Where it was like, pivot. How do we do that? And so, and we didn't want to sort of get in our own way and sort of this woe is me attitude of, oh well, we're an agency and that's what we do. We're just going to wait for it to come back. So yes, we believed it would come back, and we still believe it would come back. So back to that original question is, there are opportunities to bring on agents. I mean, Paradigm announced a third of their layoffs 2 days after the pandemic hit, which freed up a lot of agents. And so that was one of the first conversations I had, was with Andre Garrett from Paradigm, who we've known each other, and who's in their Toronto office. And it started there. And the same, Vesna actually, she came on board before the pandemic, but Furman, same situation. That just, there was at Feldman, they made decisions to, that they, as we all did, we had to cut staff and cut expenses, and there was an opportunity. And I think it's been, for us, and new energy, new people at large that come in from larger firms that have new insight and just bring that to the table. And it's been amazing. And that's where that unto itself was important, that we started doing new things. Nothing that was creating much income, but just our brains were working. We're getting excited about possibilities. And I think that alone was huge.
Well, it
So
stimulates hope. It
yeah,
stimulates hope because
yeah,
you're in a totally different mindset and headspace. You've got new artists on the roster. You've got new talent that you're interfacing with on the agency front, and you've got a new brain trust,
yeah,
at the forefront of your organization with new people on board. So, yeah, I mean, I totally understand the logic behind it, and I think they were both great additions.
yeah,
It's going to be. I'm sure it's going to continue to make you guys sweat until we've got some certainty in the marketplace. But by and large, you've diversified yourself well enough that it's not going to be that much of a concern.
yeah. Yeah, that's how I feel, and if I'm wrong, then we're all wrong. I mean, not wrong, but the wrong is that for whatever reason, the festivals don't happen this coming summer 2021, and of course that's a big problem. That if
Yes.
that doesn't happen, we've all we're all in big trouble.
It's a big
Um,
problem for everybody, including those festivals.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, totally. And so, there's no sense, there's no reason to not think it's not going to happen to some degree. And when I say some degree, if Boots and Hearts or Ottawa Blues Festival or Edmonton Folk Festival, if they can happen at 30% capacity or 50% capacity, selfishly, I think that's fine. I can't speak to the international artists. I can't speak to everyone else. I can't speak, how Ottawa Blues Festival can possibly make a go of it at 30%. Pretty tough. But so I don't know that that works for them. It probably allows them to continue on that, to get through to 2022. But selfishly, that's okay. I think we can do that, which probably if they're only 30%, that means we're probably a domestic lineup in Canada
Yes,
next
it's
year.
going to be a boon for Canadian acts for sure if they have to pare
Yeah,
back their international artists. A, because of the financial obligation. B, because of the dollar discrepancy between the U.S. and Canadian dollar. You're paying Red Hot Chili Peppers and these bands in American dollars. You're not taking Canadian dollars. And C, the border still could be closed or may have some restrictions put on it that may make it very difficult for touring groups to get up here for one-off festival events.
yeah. However, and this is where we like to, you're looking for signs of hope. Um, the fact that Oceaga went and announced the Foo Fighters, Cardi B, and Post Malone,
Yep.
they don't have more information than you and I do.
They
They
drew
don't
a
have
line in the
something.
sand. They went for it.
They went for it. And
Yeah.
so you have to make a few assumptions. And obviously, I have no idea what the negotiations were between each artist, but everybody was willing to play ball.
Right.
And whatever play ball means, but certainly it was like, okay, you're allowed to announce, and that's going to be because there ain't no 2-week quarantine for any of these acts, obviously. So the assumptions are that the borders will be open, that there won't be any kind of quarantine, or if there is, maybe it's a day or something like that. That obviously the vaccine's in play, that there's likely rapid testing. So you're taking that leap. Um, but they put their stake in the ground. So the
Yep.
flags, it's happening, and so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those moments of hope, and not that they're being, they're not being silly. They're just taking a calculated risk, and these aren't stupid people. So you have to imagine that they obviously what the downside is that doesn't happen, but you want to get ahead of it, and that's what they've done.
This business is all about calculated risk.
Yeah.
Let's get back to your origin story a little bit. So, you grew up in the business. Obviously, your dad's a prolific figure in the entertainment industry. What drew you more towards the agency side as an individual rather than promoting or managing, which is really where Gilles, your dad's passion, seems to continue to lie to this day?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, it's certainly, I think at the time when the opportunity, I was going to university, University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. This is in 1993. At the time, there was the agency was starting to grow. It was rather a new company. The management company was doing well, managing a couple family entertainers, including Fred Panner, that was really booming. Gilles had a record company, so and the concert promotion business was also doing well. The agency was just starting out, and when I started, there was an available. I was actually assistant to Richard Mills, and Richard Mills, who he wasn't a Paquin that long, but I assisted him for about 6 months, and then he moved on to Feldman. So um, of course, it was my father's company, but I still had to go interview with Richard, and he had to say, "Okay, yes, you can do this." I had no idea what an agent was. I mean, I was still only 20, and I knew the business, and I sold concessions at my dad's festivals and stuff like that. But the idea of the what I liked about the agent, and especially what I liked, is that you had as a manager, it's a deep dive. It's you manage one, two, three, four artists tops. As an agent, you have an area of expertise that's your deep dive, touring, but that you can represent many artists and satisfy, for me, whatever my musical tastes were, that were, as many of us are wide ranging. And that's what I loved about it, is that I could get in, do my shuck and jive, tell the artist and the buyer, and present scenarios and come up with strategies, um, and then apply that to other artists, with obviously shifting to depending on what that was. That's what I liked about the agency world, eh, is that you can go. It's a bit like, not that I have any kind of ADD or anything like that, but you can keep moving. You can keep moving,
Right.
and and
It
that's
it
what
is a it is a job for your dopamine receptors. Like,
right. Yeah,
I definitely appreciate where you're coming from on this, and I understand that, like, there is something to the transactional aspect of
yeah,
locking in a date, a tour, checking all the boxes, and feeling like you've accomplished something. It's like it's very tangible, where management is a bit more, it's a bit more obscure, it's a bit more ambiguous, and
yeah,
it takes longer to see the fruits of your labor, or sorry, the seeds you planted to bear the fruits of labor, right? Like, it takes a
yeah,
longer, it's a longer process. So I get
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's and I'll be standing there at a show with a manager, and we both, you both get excited to see that moment, and I've had those moments. Uh, and it's as an agent, it's like you can turn that into something right away. Whereas a manager, it's the building blocks. Now you need to put the team in place and stuff like that. The idea, as an agent, you go, you see this new artist, um, and you can go get them on a tour, literally the next day. Okay, you can go open for this. You make a call, you call a promoter, you call another agent or whatever it is, and say, "I've just seen this new artist. I believe in it." You play your passion card, and as long as you don't overplay your passion card, as long as that passion card, a few times is turned into a winner, as an agent, you're given that opportunity to play that passion card, and so that's important. And so by doing that, it's like you can spend that next 3 days building building a 6 month strategy. Now you've got to execute it, but you're getting the feedback right away. And so that's the idea of, with as being an agent, where you can really implement your strategy relatively quickly, even though it takes a while. Your strategy that's implemented quickly is really over a year or 18 months, that tour strategy. However, it can come together in a matter of, days and weeks.
And you've built a rock solid reputation as a guy who's passionate for the artists you work with, but you deliver for them, you execute for them. You've done that over multiple decades. Was there ever a time early on, though, where you thought about doing something outside of the entertainment business, where you were like, I'm not sure I'm going to follow necessarily the path of what your dad did? And did you have considerations of working in other fields prior to getting into this?
I, sure. Yeah. I mean, prior to this, honestly, it's like, looking at, when you were going to university, I took psychology, I took religion, not that I was, but like, sort of was thinking I was a bit more cerebral maybe than I ultimately was. So trying to find
Well, all of
myself.
those things would probably benefit you now.
Yeah,
Psychology for sure.
the
Uh,
psychology
and,
and stuff.
religion is just why, understanding why people worship monoliths, right?
Yeah.
And to a degree, some of that's applicable in our business too.
Oh my God, absolutely. So I didn't to I'd be lying to you if I ever thought. I didn't even know I was going to get in the music business as I was, the last year of university. So, truly on that search mode. While in it, Also, did I think about, not being an agent? Yes, but it was like, oh, maybe I'll be a manager. It was all still within the business. It was sort of toggling between, the times I had doubts about being an agent. Well, maybe I'll be a manager. But again, I don't think I had necessarily the patience for that. I don't imagine I'd ever be a manager. Although owning a management company that, and being partners in a management company, I love that, and love, and I think I have great insight into that. But really, um, I don't think I wavered much from being an agent. Um, and so, and so that I think that sort of, and out of fear that I, maybe couldn't do anything else, or and those days come where, what else am I going to do? And that's,
Right.
my God, that certainly was, you're looking, staring that reality in the face, uh, as March hit. But no, I really feel like the agent world, and the, and even, now, as we're getting into other, I like the idea of, I will always be an agent, but participating in other businesses related to the entertainment field, 100%. I see expanding there.
And you're obviously a great agent. Like I said, you've staked a great reputation, but you're also heavily involved in the leadership and the management of the company. 30 plus employees. What do you enjoy most? Do you enjoy mapping out tours and negotiating with promoters, or do you enjoy leading a team? What's your favorite aspect of what you do day to day?
I think, so. I mean, and that's, obviously it ebbs and flows as the years go by. First and foremost, it was always about uh, hearing, seeing a great artist, getting excited, signing. And I've had many of those scenarios that, when I first saw Serena Ryder, the Strumbellas, Kanon, the Sheepdogs, those stories were like just pivotal for me. And that's where, when I was able to do that, that's the most important, and still is. Um, However, now I find it exciting, um, being part of a team, and the staff, and I don't always need to be the leader of that team. I don't mind being, I don't mind being that agent where there's a responsible agent, and I'm out, mapping out the tour for someone and reporting back to it. I don't always need to be the leader. In fact, uh, I want people, I don't see myself as someone's boss. I suppose on paper, of course, that's the case, but when I'm out with people that I work with, we're a team. And nobody's, we're building this thing together. It really is a family. It is a family business, but
Right.
I feel like everybody feels that way, that we're sort of all in it together, and that there's no this the hierarchy isn't there. But
Yeah,
I
there's a
love
hierarchy on paper, but other than that, it really doesn't exist in many aspects.
totally. And I think uh it's that's the success, where you have that success where people are working together. And I think, hopefully that's what I lend, is that I can mm, have a clear vision of what people are either good at now or can be good at, and help, bring that out, or help present a scenario to someone that may not be getting it this way, but if you present it differently, they'll get it, and they'll excel.
Right. Now, you've been in this business for multiple years. You have witnessed the rise and fall of other industry people over the years. Um, One thing that resonates with me as we continue to talk is I can see and feel the passion you have for artists and projects. And I feel that once you start to lose that, you're on the edge of sliding down a very slippery slope. Once it becomes all about the commerce and you lose the excitement and the enthusiasm that you feel when you see an artist for a first time in front of almost nobody in a club, but you see the brilliance in them and you know that there's potential there. There's something magical to that motivation to keep you underpinned to the business.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you must, obviously you display it, but are you also consciously aware of, like, man, if I'm going to stay in this business, I still got to love the art and I got to love the artist because Otherwise, that's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, you know, I think the what's important, and again, early on, what was important to understand, which I think is good for longevity in this business, is that I'm not going to personally love like that go home and listen to every artist on the roster. Um, there's just certain things that are, they may not, and I'll go listen to and I can appreciate and stuff like that. What's most important is that I have to be able to identify the connection between the artist and the audience, whether that audience exists right now, whether the artist is even there yet. And that's because I don't want I'm nobody. It's the connection is between the artist and the audience. And so it's up to me to be able to go, I see that and I can help elevate that. And so in times where, because as a music fan, and I think, certainly for me, um, not that I lean like an artist, but I have an artist's sensibility maybe, where you get up and down about things, right? And so you can't, if all that's driving you is that passion for the music, that'll disappear when you get tired of the music. So it's got to be about that the art that you can sense that. And so and I think it's very important to get into, that you got to love your artist, but it's more about the personalities. I mean, it's about finding that. I mean, there's nothing more, and I found it more now than ever in the last 9 months, connecting with artists and the managers, because there's no business now. You're strategizing, but it's about, okay, how together can we come up with things that'll elevate, our brand or whatever it is. And so you're getting to know people in a different way. And so at a certain point, the music does go away, and those artists and those managers that you work with, they want to know that you can take their agenda and amplify what they're doing greater than they could with someone else or on their own. And so I think that's the passion that I feel, is that that's what's exciting, is about sort of how can, in my spot, how can I help uh, elevate things, and not just in a business sense, but can I keep the artist passionate? Can I say something that the artist or the manager goes, wow, that is a great idea, way to go, like, nice viewpoint on that, good perspective, whatever that is. That's also my job. I'm not just there to take their agenda. Of course I am. I want to hear what they say and go, how about this? Can we look at it this way? Or, by the way, you got this dead on. I think I can achieve it. Let me go. Generally, that's not the case. That generally you have to give a bit of yourself and turn it into something. And that's what's going to keep you passionate. And that's what the artists are going to find out too. And so, and you're looking for someone. I don't always need to be that person. They don't need to come to me always for that. But I think I'm more effective when I have that kind of relationship.
Absolutely. It helps build real rapport because they know you're not just telling them what they want to hear. They
Yeah.
know that you're giving them honest feedback. And I'm sure for you, that's been a bit of a process to be able to learn to diplomatically present that, depending on the artist or the management camp, when someone comes to you with a bad idea or an idea that you don't think is going to reflect well on the artist in the marketplace.
Yeah. And and with time and longevity and in the business and confidence, with time and longevity and some success gives you confidence. I'm willing to say things now, to go out on a limb that maybe I wasn't willing to do before, for fear of getting fired, or getting called out on. That's a bad idea. So that insecurity, still I have tons of insecurity, uh, but I would rather go down swinging and saying, hey, no, I think we should do it this way, rather than have kept my mouth shut. Now, sometimes there's great value in keeping your mouth shut. And believe you me, I know how to keep my mouth shut, because some things play out around you if you keep your mouth shut. So I don't need to be chitty chatty all the time. I do keep my mouth shut. Um, and it's not always strategic, but sometimes it is. So I do want to be strategic, and it's not about that, but it's you really want to you want to make a mark, but you also want it to be meaningful, and so you don't you want to do something. And again, this isn't rocket science either. At the end of the day, we're booking tours. We're getting artists in front of audiences, and we're putting a smile on people's faces. I mean, that's the beginning, middle, and end of it. And if at the end of it there's a smile on someone's face as they're walking out the door, and you haven't left carnage in the back where the promoter's lost a bunch of money and the artist hasn't made any money, if you can sort of satisfy those things, that's it. That's our job is done. Move on.
What are you guys doing in terms of artist development these days, and how are you procuring and or securing the artists that you're signing who are in the developmental phase?
We've always That's always been such a big part of what we do, the artist development, as it is for most agencies. I think we most certainly, as a company that uh, you know it wasn't until 7, 8 years into this that I moved to Toronto. So started this business. So as a company out of Winnipeg, we always sort of felt like we were the underdog, and so that we had to identify artists early and sign them early, and then do our best to over deliver for them. So we still take that attitude. Um, the
But are
artist
you
development.
allowing artists to allow? Are you allowing artists to approach you guys directly? Are you interfacing mostly with labels? Are you keeping an eye on socials? Like, what's your process for talent discovery?
It's I mean nowadays, by the Spotify and Apple and those platforms are critical. So that without question. But it's still so that we go to that. We look at those metrics all the time. But it's still old school. It's promoters, whether it's promoters, festival buyers, all those things, the record labels, publicists, other managers. I mean, it's constant connectivity. It's finding it's just other people in the industry. So it's that
You
combination.
have to be immersed.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as new people come on board, and new ideas come forward, and it's been interesting during the pandemic, because what we do when you're finding development artists is you put them out on tour. I mean, there's just no other way to do it. So that I think if I'm looking um at one of the many downsides of the pandemic, it's discovering new talent and feeling like you can't do anything. So hear this great artist, you'll even reach out to them, or you'll have that discussion, and you're going, okay, let's stay in touch. You come up with a couple, okay, do this live stream or do that, but it's a pretty short discussion, strategically speaking, about what I can bring to the table. So you're talking about, because again, it's not just that we don't know when this thing's going to end. It's that hey, let's go play summer festivals, and we'll do what we can. Well, most of the summer festivals that were for 2021 are rebooks from the 2020s. So there's that
Because it's
opportunity
rolled over.
on there,
Yeah.
and that the fall. So artist development. If something's going to have taken a hit during the pandemic, is the ability for new artists to find an outlet to find new audiences.
Yeah,
Even
realistically, from a live side, it's been pushed back an entire year for developing artists.
Yeah, and so you look at that, and that's really unfortunate, because you look at the athletes that were getting ready to go to the Olympics. 1 year removed, I don't know what percentage of them, but that's over. So
Right.
there's a window. The good news, music, it's a lifelong endeavor. So, but certainly, um, a lot of artists that would have had an opportunity have their windows closed for them, and that's sad for sure.
So, what do you guys think? what do you believe is your competitive edge on your competitors in the landscape in Canada? And full disclosure, you and I have worked together as collaborators. We've also competed on some projects, but you seem to have a very healthy perspective on the collaborator versus competitive relationship as it pertains to other companies in your domain in this business. But what are some of the things that you feel that you are doing absolutely right that you don't feel uh, is necessarily something offered by your competitors as it pertains to your clients?
Yeah, that's hard to comment, as far as, because what my competitors are doing is only from my perspective. So, to comment on that is hard because I think, we've got to take care of our own house, and that's, that's the best we can do. Certainly the competitive edge is I think, that we do have, and again, we do work outside of Canada. As we've opened a Nashville office. Some of our agents are, Vesna in particular is working in Asia and South America and Australia, and we touch on that. So we do, and Andre represents a number of his clients in North America, but ultimately Canada is our area of expertise. Um, and I think for multiple genres, multiple territories within Canada, we are experts. The fact that we have offices, I think having an office in Winnipeg has been a competitive advantage. It's allowed our company to grow. Big fish, little sea, whatever that is. But we know Western Canada like the back of our hand. And whereas maybe our competitors, and you're in this boat, Western Canada very well. You know the genre, especially country music, like the back of your hand. And so you can go deep. We can go deep in multiple genres: folk, rock, country, uh, the performing arts centers. And when you can go deep in Canada, because there is only, a dozen major markets, if you can go produce a 40 or 50-day tour, you've got an advantage over your competitor. Well, we've always had that. The new addition, and even though I'm French and speak it fluently, as the years have gone by, having moved to Toronto, I don't do as well, and so I struggle a bit more. But by Andre Garrett coming to our company, the I mean, the I didn't realize how much we were missing in Quebec. I mean, I knew it. I know so many artists tour Quebec, but and the way, and I do, I'd go to these we can cover Quebec for an artist that doesn't necessarily even need to just be Quebec, where it's like, you're struggling to get 5 or 6 markets in Quebec as an outsider. There
Yes.
really is. There really is for you can do 10 or 12 markets as an artist that isn't in Quebec, but of course you can do 40 or 50 markets if you're based in Quebec. And I think what's happened is our competitive advantages, we understand the entire country. Everybody says that, yeah, of course you know Canada, except you don't know Quebec. And and if you're a Quebec agent, you don't know the rest of Canada either. And so I feel like now we're bridging that gap. And it's, as I say, I've worked in Quebec for many years, but it's a different ballgame. It really is. And some of the best production value comes out of Quebec. The theaters are second to none. I mean, Quebec's just, it's unbelievable. I mean, Festival d'été and Montreal Jazz Festival and Osheaga, and then forget about, the 500 other festivals out there. So that was that. I do believe, and I don't want to get sort of sidetracked on that, but for years and years, I'm like, the light came on. It's like, yeah, we represent, we understand the whole country, but now we really do. And so that's a value for artists. Whether we can deliver for all of them, of course we can. It's got to be a specific artist. You got to be able to connect to the audience. But at least we can go and say, hey, we're going to go do the research now, and we can come back with real feedback.
Right.
So that makes me excited about the future.
Right. And how do you balance the obligations? Because since I've known you, you guys have always been very deep in terms of an artist roster, you know, usually 80, 100, 100 plus artists. How do you manage the critical need to diversify with ensuring you're not spreading yourself and your team too thin?
That was a big, as we got into this, it was like, okay, what are we spending our time doing as as the pandemic hit? And it was, typical 80-20 rule. 20% of our roster was making most of our money. Um, but it was actually leaning too far. It was, we actually had too many artists on the roster. And so, some hard decisions, had to be made on that front. And and at a certain point, you've got to you've got to sort of come back to it and go. You can't play the passion card all the time, because the passion card will get you a lot of artists that don't make any money. And and then you're working in fear. You're signing artists in fear, going, I got to beat the other person. And so you're just sort of you're doing all that. And you know who that's not good for? It's not good for the artist. It's
No,
not
it's
good
not
for
good for the artist. And it's not good for the industry either,
yeah,
because Uh, and I couldn't agree more with what you just said. If you sign an artist out of fear that someone else is going to sign them with the intention that you're not going to prioritize them or even shelve them, not only are you doing a disservice to that artist, you're doing a disservice to talent development nationwide, and ultimately a disservice to the industry overall. So it's good to hear how you guys have worked so hard to be aware, conscious, and manage that process.
yeah. Yeah, no, and so, and I think it's upon us. It's upon us. Of course, you're whether not of course, because you don't. I don't know what everybody's intentions are, but you're not trying to do that. You're not trying to go into something and go, okay, let's just take a shotgun approach and see what we get and see what sticks. Um, but at the end of the day, um, there is going to be and that's what I was doing. I looked at the roster, and like there's a lot of artists on here, um and I don't know that they feel that it's special to be on there. If you're that they're proud of. There was this
Yeah,
real deep sense of like, okay, and again, I don't want it to be a hierarchy. Oh my God, if you're on the Paquin roster, it's something else. But at a certain point, you just can't sign everybody.
yeah,
Uh,
you do want it to have some level of exclusivity,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, so
yeah,
people feel like they are represented and they do feel special and they do feel like their needs are being met, their professional needs are being met. But that's always been a difficult one for me as well. And it's interesting. Have you ever had a situation where you've passed on an artist you were passionate about because you just knew you couldn't give them the time and attention, and then they've gone on to do great things? Have you ever had one of those situations? I've had a few.
yeah. I mean, it's like I remember. You know, uh, did I? Who did? Yeah, for sure. Hey Rosetta was one. Great Big Sea. It was like, yeah, we had another band. It's like I didn't think they had we had another band like them, that was a bit more traditional, and they were a bit poppier. And I'm like, so I didn't go after it as hard as I could. So early days like that. Um, Plenty of art. Oh my God. I mean, just I'm trying to imagine here the artists. I don't know. It's funny because I don't know the ones that I was passionate about that I didn't sign. It's the
Right.
ones where I didn't think they'd succeed, and they succeeded, and
And
there's
you were
only
just wrong.
and I was just wrong. And so
Yeah.
there's plenty of that. I
Right.
mean, there was absolutely plenty of that. Um, but the ones that I've been passionate about, I generally, if I'm passionate about it, I'll sign it. And that may be, that may be the problem. It's like, you know, give it a day, you know, let it sink in, take it to the rest of the team. What do people think? Sort of slow play it. There's definitely value in that, because you have a couple drinks, you're at a show, wow, that was the greatest show ever. maybe as, give it a minute. But at the same time, it's like, no, that's, you want to remember that moment. So I struggle with that. I struggle with that thing. It's like taking away that passion, take it to the team, because it shouldn't be a democracy. Everybody should have to, as an agent, or as, someone in the entertainment business, you got to lay it down, and you'd be like, okay, if it's a democracy, nothing's going to get done here. So everybody has to, but they have to, you know,
We
everything.
have to be very aware that that doesn't get clipped out of context. But
Totally. Yeah.
I I hear what you're saying
Yeah.
though. If you believe in it enough and you can sell it with your passion and a plan to the rest of the team,
Yeah.
then you know it's the right decision.
Yeah.
But if you can't, then you probably know something's missing.
Well, and that's the thing, because passion without that plan, I mean, it's just a dream. Like, you have to
Right.
know the business. You can't just be like, they're going to be huge, and then we'll be like, okay, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to help them get huge? And so that's what it is. And so, I think we get lost in the passion thing, because, my God, of course you should be passionate, but you got to have a plan. And you got to be able to see, that passion has to be a vision and then turn into a plan. And then you got to rally the troops. And so, I know we have passed on artists, and, and you go in an agency meeting and someone sort of presents them, and everybody goes no. And then, you know, a year later or 2 years later, that agent comes and says, see, I told you. And I, at the time, was like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. But I look back on him and go, that's not my fault. That's your fault. You didn't sell it. And that's and I say that, I talk about myself that way. If I believe in it, then I should be able to present it properly. And if I can't present it to the team, then I probably can't present it to the promoter or the manager or the artist or the record label and stuff like that. So that's the thing. It's like, take that, what you've seen, and even if you don't know the business, because you can be brand new to the business, but you got to have a plan.
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
It's not enough to just have passion, and I couldn't agree more with that. Um, let's talk a little bit about how you guys started in Winnipeg, and then eventually decided that you needed to be a major player on the national stage, and so you opened the office in Toronto in 1999, and you made the move down there personally to open that office.
yeah,
That was a big move on the landscape at the time because the agency group was very powerful. Feldman was obviously a force and remains to be a force on the Canadian industry scene. It was a ballsy move at the time, but you knew that it was either that or bust.
yeah. We could have stayed in Winnipeg, and it would have been. I don't know that the agency would exist the way it does today. It would probably still exist, but, maybe the management company would have been. But, for it was not going to happen, if we stayed in Winnipeg. And part of the reason was we were presenting ourselves as, sort of the new young alternative. And at the time, it was myself and Rob Ziffarelli that moved to Toronto, and we left our partners behind. Him and I moved to Toronto. We lived together. We worked together. We were like, so it was like, people were like, okay, here are these, these two new guys. At the time, Darcy Gregoire was working for us, in Winnipeg. He didn't decide to move. So we actually, as it turns out, had, three agents that, Darcy ended up moving to LA, with UTA. He went to the agency group. He's now at Feldman. Ziffarelli at Paradigm. We knew we had it. We knew we had something different than our competitors had. And if we didn't move to Toronto, it was never going to happen.
And because of, and just let me stop you there for 1 second. And that the impetus for that mindset was we need to be on the ground in Toronto at the showcases, interfacing with the labels, interfacing with the managers, taking lunch meetings. That was the idea because we all know this business is somewhat remote.
Yeah,
And you can be on the phone in Winnipeg, booking shows for your client in Australia. It doesn't really matter where you are from that perspective. But for you, it was about having a face and a name in Toronto in that ecosystem.
absolutely. And at the time, of course, we're late '90s, early 2000s. Um, you, it'd be one thing if I moved away now, you know, uh, we have a reputation, we have artists, but we had, it was just all young artists, and if it wasn't young artists, it was, old folk singers. So there was, even though we felt like we were, as the agents, on cutting edge, but you had to be there. There were, all the record companies were here, all the major promoters were here, being in Toronto. So, and they knew us, they liked us. But if you're not at that showcase, and again, those days it was label showcases were every night of the week. They were signing new bands all the time. If you're not at the showcase and you call, the artist before the show, hey, I'm in Winnipeg, I won't be at your showcase, and then you call them after the show, that's meaningless. You had to be there. And so, other than if we were going to, spend, once, 3 days a week on a plane, you had to be there, and that was critical. And it took some time, because you're going, now you're first in line, now you connect with the artist. Well, at the time, the labels were like, they've just invested, I don't know, $250,000, $500,000 in this artist. They're like, yeah, we like Paquin, but they've never broken an artist before. So we were battling that too, even though we were now in the room, had a seat at the table, signing artists. We also had the labels and managers going, these guys haven't proven themselves yet. So
Right.
then, so that it takes time.
Even though your dad had been in the business for decades, you were still the new kid on the block as it pertained to the Toronto music ecosystem.
Exactly. Totally. Yeah.
Right.
So that was, that took some time. And then, of course, all as you're going up, that people are out, going after the artists, of course, that are already there, that you sign. Other agencies are trying to sign those artists. And then when they can't do that, they go after the staff. And so, we lived through that. And, I had many meetings, personally, with other agencies. Is like, is it time to sell? Is it time to merge? This and that. And so it, like, it was, a constant barrage of things, which is expected. But again, it was, Zeffirelli left after, I think he was here 4 years in Toronto, and he had been with Paquin 4 years prior to that. And it was time for him to go. And and him and I are still very close. But it was time
Great
for him.
guy.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that was important for me in my growth when he left, because even though, it was my father's company, my name on the door, it was Zeffirelli and I. And so when he left, it's like, okay, I got to step up or not. And
It
so,
forced you to fill some voids.
totally.
Yeah.
That was a big challenge, and I grew a lot at that time.
At what point, when you guys opened your office in Toronto, did you realize you were a bit of a threat to some of the bigger agencies out there? Like, at what point did either they make a move or come after an artist, or at some point, as much as that might piss you off in the moment when it happens, when they come after a staff member or they come after a client of yours, there's also something vindicating about it, because it represents the moment that you're now part of the club. You are a threat. You are a player. Do you remember when that moment happened for you?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I remember many, many moments like that, because that's the funny thing, is that it's, the first time it happens, and it happened while we were in Winnipeg. So it's like, that's when you got excited. You're like, okay, because it proves that you know what you're doing, that you've identified artists that are, that have, that can maintain and grow, and that you're on the radar. So by the time it started happening in Toronto, it was just, that's the way it was going. But I remember when it did the first time, when it was in Winnipeg, you're like, okay, yes, I know what I'm doing. We've got good taste. Now we've got to be able to hang on. And so every time
What
it
artist
happened,
was it, Julien, or was it a
it,
staff member?
no, it was, the first time it was an artist. It was Natalie McMaster. And she had just, this was when Celtic music was blowing up, and she was on a Tim Hortons commercial. And it was, we had, oddly enough, we ended up losing her thereafter, but it was like, they had gotten the full pitch, and they stayed with us. As I say, they ended up leaving later, but it was that thing where it's like, okay, we hung on, we got another chance, and that's all you can ask for, right? It's like, okay, we withstood that first wave, and that was always it. It's like, if you can withstand that first wave, That means you've got enough, feet on the ground that you can handle it. If you can't withstand the second wave, it's probably on you because you were given a shot across the bow and you had to hang on. And that's how I always felt. It's like, you know, you got to create a relationship where they're going to have your back at least once.
Right. There's nothing worse than being blindsided.
Yeah,
You're interfacing with the manager and the artist, and everything's great, and they're on tour, and suddenly get a call the next day, and you're fired.
yeah,
That's the worst scenario.
yeah,
I agree with you. I'd rather know competitors are sniffing around my client
yeah,
and get the opportunity to potentially recalibrate or respond, or just say, hey, listen, I am doing the best job for you possible. This
yeah.
pitch is bullshit. If you want to find that out, then take the plunge.
Totally. Yeah. And we've had artists come back, which is also the most vindicating. Um, and and then the artists that don't and continue on. So I've my God, gone through the gamut. That's for sure. I've seen a lot of scenarios play out. But yeah, it was once in Toronto, the gloves were off already. It was a constant barrage and
Right.
had to sort of, and again, and you're dealing with because at that point you really are just relying on your swagger and your good taste in music and your passion for that artist because on its surface the competitors at the time had far more knowledge than we did.
Yes, you're up against these Goliaths, right?
Yeah,
Like Feldman, for example, was a Goliath on the landscape, and they were highly aggressive,
yeah.
especially at that time. Do you think that corporately has the business evolved to where it is slightly more collaborative now? Like, do you feel like there was more disputes in the good old days, and that's gone a little bit by the wayside, or has the aggressiveness just changed in form?
That's interesting. I think it is more collaborative, and I think it's more collaborative because there, yes, there's company culture, but it's about the individuals. And so, maybe, people have issues with individuals, but that, if a tour needs, at the end of the day, you know, you need to deliver for your artists. And so if you need to package, and you always have to package with other agencies, you need to keep that dialogue open all the time. So you may have a problem, with someone at the top of one company, but you should still be collaborating, and so should the rest of the people that work, in your office, be collaborating with other people as well. So I think the idea that and it comes and goes as far as it's like, oh, you're really pissed off, and let's go bury them, and let's go do this. You go through that, but that's just ego.
Yes. And
It's
it's a dangerous cycle to get sucked into because it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, totally, totally, and it's you're sort you just, and it's just filled with negativity as well. You want to take a place where it's like, okay, I won or I lost, and move forward. And if you lose, you can spend your time finding all the reasons to be pissed off at someone, whether it's the manager for doing it, whether it's the other agency for poaching the artist. And so, there's all that stuff, and you don't want to be walked all over either. So there's that balance where and that's when your ego gets involved. Where it's like, do I look weak? Am I weak? Are they just walking all over me? And so you do have to push back. It's important at certain points to push back, but you also have to go with
Yeah,
your
comparatively, and not to sound misogynistic, but it's kind of like a guy taking a pass at your wife right in front of you at the bar.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
how far am I going to push this, right? Am I
right,
going to get up and clock the guy, or
yeah,
am I going to reprimand him verbally, or am I going to ignore it?
yeah.
And I think the nuance there is depending on the individual who's making the pitch from the competitive agency. Is it depends a little bit on their psyche as to how you calibrate your response.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's just that you have, and your playbook it can't just be one response all the time. you have to react to the situation, and you have to be able to react and have confidence in what you're doing, or not have confidence, but know that you can't do the same thing you've done before, because it's a pattern, so that people are going to be able to read you and do that. So that you have to, and you got to get out of your comfort zone too. And so, do I like, yelling and freaking out, and I don't. That's not my area of comfort. But I have to be able to go there, and I
Right.
have to be able to protect not just myself, but the people that I work with, so that they know that I'm, when we go to battle, that I can, lay it down. And I have to know that they're going to do the same thing.
I don't think
Um,
you and I have ever yelled at each other.
no, I don't think so.
I don't think it's
No,
ever happened in,
let's
well,
let's
over
let's
2
change that.
decades.
Let's change it today.
Totally, we could start that right now. The other thing, Julian, that I think is something that I would credit you and your company for in changing the ecosystem and the environment a little bit in the entertainment business is that because you're diversified and you're working in multiple different levels, like we are, as well as buyers and promoters, we're not just competitors with each other, we're also customers,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah,
we will buy shows, dates, tours, represent festivals as buyers, work with each other on scenarios and situations like that. So when you look at your bottom line at the end of the year, you go, wow, like, maybe I had a few disputes with Feldman or Paquin, but at the end of the day, they were a damn good customer.
yeah.
Or we
Totally.
bought, $2 million worth of talent off them. So we're a good customer to them,
Yeah,
and therefore they're less likely to roll the dice to try and poach one client to jeopardize that holistic relationship that we have.
yeah. No, that's true. And because that's the nature of being Canadian, right? Is that you're diversified, and so everybody's intertwined, maybe in a way that Americans wouldn't sort of understand. Manager's a manager, an agent's an agent, and a promoter's a promoter. Up here, those lines are blurred, and I think, um, again, because we're a very small market, I think it's actually healthier, because of that very fact, because you're not just going to go nuclear on somebody, because you have to think about the bigger picture. Uh, yeah, you're not going to be pushed around, and there's and conflict is part of the business that we're in, and but at a certain point you represent the artist, at a certain point you represent a client or a festival, and you have to know what hat you have on in that case. To blanket say, I'm only an agent and I don't do anything else, and that may be true, but to not see that exists out there, and especially in Canada, that sort of, for survival mode, has to exist. You don't want to abuse the other position you're in. That's the whole
Right.
thing.
Well, you can have a dispute with somebody, but the reality is, and I learned this early on, is people just don't go away. It's
Yeah,
it's like canceling people on social media. It's not like they stop existing.
yeah,
And if you blacklist or ban someone, and listen, I've even been blacklisted at one point after a temper tantrum by an agent that I had a dispute with, and I was like, okay, well, I'll talk to you the next time I've got an offer for one of your artists. Like,
yeah,
they're not going to turn down the business. They've got
yeah,
a fiduciary responsibility
yeah,
to accept offers on behalf of their artist that make sense. And if you're positioned as well as a buyer or promoter, it's like, yeah, you can blacklist me all you want because you're pissed off about this other thing. But
yeah,
the reality is, I know if I send you an offer for 100 grand for artist XYZ, you're going to pick up the phone,
yeah.
or somebody in your office will.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. And so and I think
Really.
that exactly, you're trying to coexist with people, pr- protect what's yours, move forward what's yours or what your agenda is. Um, but you don't want to be a sleazeball. You don't like
No.
when someone's being a sleazeball. Um, and if you get caught doing something that's on the edge of being sleazy, you got to own up to it as well. And we've all been there. It's like, hey, yeah, I did, and say so rather than deny. and go no, and then you start projecting and you're freaking out. It's just it based on that, and so that's why I think when people say, like, Julian, you've got integrity, and I don't take that lightly because I feel I do have integrity. Um, it's trying to stay out of my own way, where that anger comes, and it's like, okay, why am I angry? Can I sit back? And lots of times I don't, and then I say something I regret, and then you got to keep up that facade. You got to stay
Right.
angry if it's going to mean
Right.
anything. And it's like, oh my God, what am I doing? So
Yeah.
I try to avoid those situations because it doesn't feel healthy as well.
That's very self-aware of you to realize, is the anger coming from the actual confrontation, or is it rooted in my own insecurity about the way I really feel?
Yeah,
And it takes a lot of self-awareness to get to that place where you can discern between the two, because
yeah,
we've all been on either side of that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally.
This has been great, man. Thank you for
Awesome.
opening up and sharing everything you have about all of your monumental success in this business, the way you've built this company and evolved it, significantly from what it was when you started. And it's always a joy working with you and your team. So thanks for
Appreciate it,
being
Jim.
on
Thanks
this.
for having me. This went by super quick. So
Yeah, we've already been over an hour.
yeah, that's awesome. Well, have a great holiday.
All right. Well, we'll upload it in the new year. You can listen to it on one of your long runs.
Yeah, there you go.
All right,
All
buddy.
right. See you later.
Thanks, Julian.
Okay, talk to you later.